Public school systems are what? What is the public school system? It is an arm of the government, right? These are systems that we set up locally that are funded by your tax dollars, right? And if you look at what's happened to public schools, there was no way I would ever send any of my children to a public school system in today's society, in today's world. I would homeschool first and foremost. That's a topic for another day. Let's talk about the bloated budgets for public school systems. The old adage of throw more money at it and that'll fix the problem, as if that ever worked for anything, right? And that's what we've done with school systems. We've given them these huge bloated budgets where all these bureaucrats getting paid multiple six figures, like the superintendents of these school systems getting paid huge dollars, right? To put pornographic materials into our children's school, right? To confuse them about their gender, to create ideologies, or to teach them that it's okay. Well, I won't even go there. I'm so angry about all this nonsense with gender dysphoria as even being a thing in a child who hasn't reached sexual puberty yet. It's maddening, and it's abuse. And the fact that the schools are playing a role in pushing that propaganda BS is a crime. It's a crime. Anyway, let's move on. You've got bloated budgets, you've got traditional family definitions being under attack, you've got gender confusion, the Common Core, which any of you parents who've ever tried to do math through Common Core, it takes twice as long. It's utterly ridiculous, and it's not. It's work for the sake of work instead of work for the sake of achieving a goal, right? I mean, anybody can dig a hole and fill it back up. There's nothing important about that work, and that's what Common Core has done to our children. It's created more steps and more work for them to do for no other reason than to just keep them busy so that they can pass a standardized test that doesn't prepare them for the real world. And so now they can't think for themselves. And so now they're more prone to being a victim of a lot of these weird policies that our governments and institutions are coming up with. Schools have failed to teach children the essentials. They are tech dependent, right? So nowadays, don't read a book, for God's sake. Let's put it up on a pretty picture, and all you can use is a screen, right? Everything has to be on the computer. You can't send them to the library and teach them how to look up a book and actually read for themselves. They've got to go to the internet, right? And they've got to be dependent on a Google search that they can't think for themselves. They're not taught to think for themselves. They're taught to go through a process and go through a motion for the sake of the motion, not for the sake of serving the child. And then they're serving the children in the school poison disguised as food. Many of you may know this, but ketchup is classified as a vegetable in the public school system. It's part of how they get their funding from the federal tax dollars for the programs for school lunches and breakfast. And then physical education is largely been dismissed in public school systems in lieu of more classroom time. So if you're a little boy and you haven't had your exercise and your physical activity today, and you're driving your teacher crazy because you have no physical outlet for the energy, and you're being told to sit in a chair for 8 hours without any type of physical activity, then they want to diagnose you with attention deficit disorder and pump you full of Ritalin, which is a stimulant pill that has a paradoxical effect on these kids and sucks their mind away, right? Like, that's our school system. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to not teach your kids. It's designed to give your kids propaganda. And it's designed to not allow them to think for themselves, so that when they go on out into the real world as an adult, they're completely slept out or slapped out of left field because they never saw it coming. They weren't prepared for it. It's like going to war and not having a gun. I mean, you're going to lose that war. And so we have to better prepare our kids, and we can't we can't trust the public school systems. Let's move to the next slide. These are the norms of illness. I call this the norms of illness because these are things that people have accepted as normal in our society that aren't normal. Right? And again, many of you probably already know this, but symptom management without asking why you have symptoms, right? So when you go to the doctor and you have a list of symptoms, they give you a diagnosis. That's what we were talking about earlier, diagnostic centric. And then here's some chemicals to treat those symptoms. We don't know why your symptoms are caused, but we know why that treating them with chemicals is the right thing to do, right? That's normal, right? How many people go to their doctor? The doctor says, yeah, you're diabetic. We need to put you on metformin. And they don't talk to them about diet, and they don't talk to them about exercise. And if they refer them to a nutritionist, the nutritionist will talk to them about, you need to eat more carbs, you need to get more grains, eat whole grains if you're diabetic, as if whole grains are going to solve the diabetes crisis. They're part of the diabetes crisis. And, you know, again, the norms of illness is you're getting food, fake food, that isn't really food, and it's actually being called food by everyone. How many people have, you know, these horrific pizza nights at home, you know, where they're ordering this, you know, smattering of grain that's been grown on genetically modified seed, and it's got poison chemicals sprayed all over it, and they added bromine to condition the dough, which is a halide that damages the thyroid gland, right? And they bleached it out with chlorine bleach, and so chlorine also is damaging to the thyroid. And then they smother it full of cheese, which is derived from cows that are stuffed into these little small corners of the world, and they're being fed poisoned grains. The same grains that pizza crust made are being fed to these cows 24/7, and they're extrapolating as much milk with hormone production from these cows, and that ends up showing up in your cheese, and now that's all over your pizza. And then let's put some genetically chemically loaded tomato sauce on that as well, and then let's throw in some nitrates for good order on the meat, and let's just call that food. And if you just so happen to say, you know what, my family and I are not going to eat, we're not going to partake in that, everybody wants to look at you and call you crazy, right? And say that you're the one who's a food snob, or you're the one who has a problem, right? That's the norm of our society. That's why we always talk about you've got to be a warrior to escape those norms, because people will try to beat you down, right, with these crazy ideas that somehow giving that food to your kid and allowing your kid to drink soda every day at every meal is somehow healthy. Yet they're overweight and they're all going to visit their doctor on the regular, and that's another norm of illness, is that you need a doctor in your life for every aspect or walk of your life. A healthy population visits a doctor in times of acute situations where doctors may be necessary. This is, you need surgery, or you had a knife stab, or got in a car accident and there was acute trauma. Our doctors are the best in the world at acute trauma. They are the worst in the world at chronic illness. And you know, moving on, we've got mass exposure to chemicals in our water that are accepted as social norm. There's fluoride in our water, there's chlorine in our water, there's chloramine and bromine in our water. I live in Houston. Last time somebody analyzed it, there were 42 prescription medications found in the drinking water after it was filtered by the city. 42 prescription drugs. Now, some would say, oh, they're in such small amounts that it's not going to hurt you. But, you know, the law of chemistry, which is synergism, meaning when you add one chemical to another, you get unprecedented and unpredictable synergistic effects. When you add 42, what are you going to get? We don't know, but it isn't okay. It's not acceptable. And so again, if you decide that you're going to spend your money on a filtration system to help protect your family from these things, everybody looks at you as if you have a serious problem, right? And that's our society. Those are societal norms. Now, let's move to this next slide, because I want to get into a little bit beyond what are societal norms and just into pharmacy itself. I think we need to have a little bit of talk tonight about pharmacy and corruption, or this conversation wouldn't be complete. So what you're looking at here is, this is taken from the Department of Justice, their website. So it's a great tool. You can go to the Department of Justice and you can pull up any lawsuit on a number of different pharmaceutical companies. I'm going to show you a summary of those here shortly, but this is just an example of a couple. And this one on the bottom, you can see here, Justice Department announces largest healthcare fraud settlement in its history. Pfizer, remember, who's Pfizer, right? Just remember who Pfizer is. Pfizer is that company that produced this jab for the disease that shall not be named, that we're all supposed to trust that they did their diligence and that everything is safe and effective, right? But look here, the U.S. fines them $2.3 billion for fraudulent marketing. What does that mean? That means they lied about their product. Okay, they lied to the tune of the largest fine in history at the time this fine was given, and the world is just ignoring that. That would be like saying, let's let the crook in our house. We know last time he was here, he stole all the silverware, but go ahead and let him back in And maybe he won't steal the silverware this time. You can also see above, there's a Department of Justice reaches an $8 billion settlement with OxyContin, which was the Purdue Pharma scandal where they were promoting and addicting large swaths of rural America and the East Coast is particularly. They were addicting them to basically to painkillers and destroying lives. Now let's look at the next slide. I want to show you a summary. This is actually published by the Journal of the American Medical Association. This is a summary of fines given by the government from the years 2003 to 2016. And you can see here's a list. On the left is the name of the drug company, and that first column to the right of that is the value of penalties assessed by the government to those companies in thousands of dollars. So what does that mean? That means if you look at this first one under GlaxoSmithKline, you see 9.775419. That's 9.7 billion in fines. And the number of penalties that they committed, it was 27. Which you can also see. So this isn't like a one-time offense, and that's my point. Like usually with crime, it's usually once they get caught, it was when they got caught was when they got the penalty. But how many crimes did they commit before they got caught? Like the person that gets caught robbing the house usually gets caught not on the first go round, but after several successful robberies, right? And then they get caught, and the only thing they get put in jail for is the time they got caught. Right, so I want you to keep that in mind too, because the nature of a criminal enterprise is a criminal enterprise is a criminal enterprise. If they get caught, it means they've been at it for a while and they just got unlucky. But now look at this next one: Pfizer, 2.9 billion; Johnson & Johnson, 2.66 billion; Abbott Laboratories, 2.5 billion; Merck, 2 billion; Eli Lilly, 1.7 billion. You can read and go down that list. My point is if you look at these are billions of dollars of fines on the things they got caught for, okay? Are there things they didn't get caught for? Look, I can't make that accusation. I don't know. But a smart man reads between the lines. A smart woman reads between the lines. Now let's look at this next slide. You can see here, these are the reasons. So I want you to see the reasons that these fines were given. And so you can see bribery, okay, was one of the reasons. What bribery? That's a crime. Okay, competition, meaning they were silencing their competition. Now, how many of you were censored during this last couple of years? I know I was censored. New York Post wrote a hit piece on me and tried to basically defame me for talking about vitamin D. Right? Business Insider wrote a hit piece on me. You know what the title of their article was? Doctor recommends lethal doses of vitamin D. Now, if that's not trying to squash the competition, I don't know what is. I was investigated by several boards, all for talking about vitamin D and the disease that shall not be named. So if you look at these companies have been fined for crushing competition, for trying to squash out competition. They've been fined for disclosing the wrong information. They've been fined for kickbacks. They've been fined for misleading marketing as well as off-label marketing. So again, these are crimes that they were found guilty of. Now guess how many people went to jail when these companies were found guilty? 0. No one ever went to jail. The company paid a fine, which was a fractional amount of the amount of money and profit that they made from directly lying and then subsequently hurting the people who were at the brunt of that lie. So again, criminal enterprise is the word I want you to think about, because again, people who are willing to lie for a profit do not have your best interests in mind. And I don't care if they're in charge of a foundation that has a kind of a pseudo, a lot of these companies have foundations that donate money so that people can get their drugs at low cost. And so that, again, that in the public eye, that makes them look good. But a lot of these companies, again, they may not have your best interests at heart. And that's just something for you to research more and think about. It's sad. It's sad that we live in that world. Here's another example of corruption. Let's go to the next slide here. So I talked a little bit about this a couple weeks ago, but the new blood pressure guidelines. So this was an article published. This is not brand new. This is from 2005, but I want to give you an example of the fraudulent activity or the corruption and the conflict of interest activity that goes on behind the curtain, right? Behind the curtain of the doctor's office. So you can see here behind each of these panels, so these are panels that were convened that decided what blood pressure levels should be, right? And so for years, all doctors agreed that normal blood pressure on the systolic end, the top number that your doctor gives you, should be between 100 and 140. But some of these panels convened, and what they decided is that no, 100 to 140 is too much. Let's lower it to make normal between 100 and 130. And so anybody with 130 to 139, we're now going to say need to go ahead and put on medication, right? And so let's look at those panels, right? So 9 of the 11 authors of the guidelines had direct ties to drug companies, meaning they had a conflict of interest to be on that panel. The drug industry welcomed the new treatment guidelines. Of course they did, because it increased their bottom line. How much did it increase their bottom line? In 1 year's time, it increased their profit by $3 billion. That's a lot of money, right? To have doctors who are being paid by these companies to change what the definition of high blood pressure is, right? And that's how pre-hypertension was invented. So that's an example. Then you have, this is out of the journal Science, hidden conflicts, pharma payments to FDA advisors after drug approvals spark ethical concerns. This is a big deal. If a doctor is on a panel at the FDA and that doctor's job is to prove the safety and efficacy of a drug, that doctor should not be receiving money from that pharmaceutical company, not before he makes that call and not after he makes that call. If you really want a non-biased approval of a medication that truly is safe and effective, we have to have trust in the government and in the entities that the government hires or contracts out to help make these decisions. And so, again, these hidden conflicts, they're hidden because what happens in a lot of cases is the pharmaceutical companies don't pay the doctor before they make that drug approval. They pay them after the approval is already done. So, the doctor can then go into the FDA and say, no, I don't have any conflict of interest. But then a year later, that pharmaceutical company is giving him a payoff. Is that a post-payment thank you? We don't know. That's the problem with it, though. And many ethical doctors are up in arms over these post-FDA approval approvals that are going on where doctors are being reimbursed after the fact. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.